All right. Okay, let's get going. So who am I? I'm Jack Franks. I'm a senior developer and architect at Breakthrough Technologies. And I've been doing Drupal for a couple, 2-3 years now, and web development for several decades. And today we're talking about automated acceptance testing. So, specifically, this is automated testing Drupal sites and applications with Selenium WebDriver. Now, we're not talking about Behat or Gherkin or Cucumber, any of the cool, sort of non-codey tests. This is really the philosophies of automated testing, and then a live demo of just straight coded up WebDriver. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is how traditionally features get tested, and that is manually. This is testing features by hand. This is what our QA does. This is what testers do. You have people sitting in front of computers, sitting on devices, and they are exercising requirements, clicking buttons, trying to break stuff, trying to get through a system, and we have people doing this. This is expensive. It's error prone because each one of these people has to go through these test plans in a repeatable fashion. They have to go through the test plan the same way, start to finish. You give them a new build and something breaks right in the middle, well, they have to go through the entire test plan in order to find the place where that breaks. And in order to do all of that, that test plan has to be solid anyway. They have to know the feature that they're testing before they can successfully test it. Now, once all the features are good and ready to go, let's say we've developed for a few sprints, we have a client release that we're ready to do. Well, now we have to regress. So before the release, all the testers have to go in and test all the functionality. So really, it's feature testing for every feature in the product, all the old ones, all the new ones, manually, by hand. So it is expensive, and it's error prone, and they need solid test cases. Really, it is exactly like regular manual feature testing, but on a loop for the entire site, for every feature. So we've all been through product releases where some requirement changed, some test got missed, and something buggy went out to a client. Or we've spun our own cycles because some requirement changed, some test was hit, and came up with a false negative. Very expensive. Very. It's so manual, and this is bad news. But then we usher in the era of automated testing. So really, automated testing in a nutshell is code that tests code. It's scripts, it's record and playback, it's natural language testing in a tool like Behat or Cucumber. It's code to test out your code, and this way we can know when a feature is actually done. Because how do you know when a feature is complete? We can check our requirements, we can check our user stories and our acceptance criteria, we can do a demo, a stakeholder says it's right, QA might say it's right. We can bang out some form, maybe there's some sort of complicated form validation rule, like if you pick blue and the color, the size can't be greater than an extra large. So we have to test that manually when we write it. And yeah, if we test it manually once we write it, we're developers. We know that means we're testing it once when we write it. And that means every time we make a change and we give something to QA, chances are we haven't gone back to this same form. So the fact that we're writing out test code before we make a push means that we as developers are committing to what we expect done to mean. So I write out a test that exercises that form, and I know that rule, that if I order a blue one, I can't go higher than an XL. See, I've already forgot the requirement.
That's why we have pencils to write things down.
It's analog. But it lets me commit to something being done by the time I hand it off. So I know now that now I've gone through an extra set of checks in order to ensure that what I'm handing off to QA is what I have interpreted the requirements to be. So for automated testing, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. There's unit testing. Now again, this is code that tests code, and the unit tests are unit tests. They are very small, very atomic. They test one bit of functionality against an expected set of inputs to an expected set of outputs. That's what unit testing is. In test-driven development, you're writing a test to test some functionality. It'll immediately fail because you've only written the test. Now you come back, look at the conditions of the test, look at what it is that you're trying to actually write, and then write code to do it and make the tests pass. So test-driven development is all red, green, refactor, repeat. And what that means is you write a failing test that exercises your requirement. You write code to make that test pass, and only that test pass without any extraneous stuff. This is you aren't going to need it sort of thing. Make the test pass, see what you can refactor and reuse, rerun the test, make sure everything is still good, commit. Now, in a lot of platforms, that's good, and I am such a proponent of test-driven development unit testing, but in Drupal, unit tests suck. We have simple test, but it is slow, slow, slow. And really, I mean, face it, most of what we're developing in Drupal is all integration-y anyway, because it's PHP. We pretty much know, I'm going to take such an input and I'm going to do a thing to it, and it's going to spit out some result on the other side, or write something to a database, or affect an entity. But now we're into the fact where we're affecting entities. So in order to make simple test work, we need to bootstrap Drupal, tell it which kind of modules we're using, give our dependencies, set up our test framework data, and then we can get to the point where after this all succeeds, we can get to that level where we're now testing our module for, if I have a form alter hook and I need to make sure my dependent fields are hidden. Well, we got to do this, and this is minutes every time, to make sure that this is going to pass. It's terrible. It's my opinion that if a test doesn't do anything visible for more than about 30 seconds, developers are just not going to run them. Now, everybody says, and surprisingly, I haven't heard this very much today, but everybody says, yeah, wait for Drupal 8. We're going to have PHP unit integrated. It's going to be great. And maybe it will, and I'm looking forward to it. But that's not what we have today. So today, we're going to talk about acceptance testing. Now, most of the time when we talk about acceptance testing, this is browser automation. When people are writing their behat tests, and it's basically a natural language sort of interpreter that drives WebDriver or Sahi or something out on the back end. And for Drupal apps, this is actually one of the easiest ways to go, because you don't have to bootstrap a site right from the start. You can do it against development, depending on how deep your tests go against your sort of test data. But the good news is that all of these automated tests are repeatable. And they're repeatable, which means every time you do a feature, before every commit, you can click a button, bam, it goes out. It'll exercise our form. So we've got now our form with a validation rule. If it's blue, you can't do more than an XL. It's got some form alter on it, so maybe it hides a couple of fields. And now, say we're changing the taxonomy makeup, and blue, is replaced with indigo. Well, now of course that form is going to fail. Now we can tell, and it repeats. We can run this every time, and we will get the same tests for every build. You don't ever have to blind hand a build off to QA, because another thing that happens to us as developers, we're in there, we're testing something, and we are convinced that it's solid. We've only touched one module file, and you hand it off, and they deploy it, and look, they can't log in, or they copy it up, white screen. Well, fantastic. We could have caught we could have caught all of that. So we run our tests, we know our functionality functions, and it saves everybody's time. QA is not irritated because you gave them another failing build. We're not irritated because they rejected another failing build. We deploy something and we know that it works. Another thing that the browser automation testing is good for is automating complex workflows. Now, I recently came off of a project that was actually a fairly involved workflow of accreditation management. So it had these customers would come in, they'd have to go through this whole rigmarole and proof and validation and fill out forms and do electronic signatures, and the whole set of steps for the workflow was about 14 items long, and steps 1 through 4 were done by the initial client, and then steps 5 and 6 had to be done by one of the client staff members. And then it went back to the customer, and then back to the staff member, and then up to an administrator, and then someone of a different role had to do something, and then it went back to the customer again. So, when you're working on a workflow like that, typically we're developing that in order. That's how user stories come. The BAs give you, well, here's all the stuff for step 1, and then step 2 and 3, and so on. So when we write it and we QA it, that's how it works. Well, now the thing is we're working on step 11. And we've now changed data structures, changed forms, updated a theme, whatever. So now the data that QA has been testing with is no longer valid because we've changed an entity structure, say, in Drupal. And whatever you had saved for step 3 before, well, now that we're on step 11, we knew that we had to change step 3. So they need new test data every time. And going through this, all 11 steps of that to get to the point where there's new development is hours of work every time. So walking through end to end is something we can do automating straight from the browser. We got to the point where this like hour and a half process to set up a single accreditation program was down to running in 4.5 minutes, start to finish. All through Selenium. So, but people aren't doing it. Like I hear all kinds of reasons why people are not doing it. It's hard to learn. It's a new technology. It doesn't do everything that we need it to do. Our team's too big. We can't expect everyone to do this. Or the team's too small. I can't expect anyone to do this. A lot of time you just hear it takes too much time and it costs too much money, and all of that is incorrect. Maybe the first one might be expensive. Maybe the first one might push your delivery, a sprint out a little bit. But as soon as you figure out how this stuff works, and Selenium in particular has a gigantic community and huge amounts of example sample code. This will save you time. Again, the workflow example, I had maybe 8 hours in the entire test automation suite. That means that QA would, by the 4th or 5th time, they're creating a new set of data as a new step is added to the program. It is now more than paid for itself. So. The best time to do this was all the way at the beginning of the project. The best time to learn this was 5 years ago, and that's fine. The next best time to do it is today. So it's never too late. You got a big team, you got a small team, everybody chips in a little bit. You got one guy that does it, doesn't matter. Start doing it. It will pay off. It will pay off huge. So for browser automation tools, the two I'm really going to talk about are Selenium WebDriver and Sahi. Selenium WebDriver is clearly the most popular one. It's got the biggest community. It's got a port and a driver hook in every language. The thing is, it's a little unreliable. It does give a lot of false negatives. Like there have been times when, the time sync is that I have run something locally and it works, it passes, I check it in, deploy to the server, and then one test run works, deploy something else, now the test fails. And when that's automated continuous integration, sort of Jenkins emails the entire world that a test failed, and then you just go and you run it again immediately and it passes, that's annoying. But Selenium is, its model needs very explicit waits. So if you have things like AJAX calls or a DOM that the elements are slow to load, you're linking out to other content, the stuff you're looking for isn't always at the ready when Selenium thinks it is. So there are times when you have to very explicitly instruct it to wait. And I'll have an example of that in a little bit. By default, it'll run in Firefox, but you can make it do IE if you're doing IE. You can make it do Chrome. Those things just need an extra little driver to go, to go with it. Selenium itself, the server, runs wherever you're going to be executing the tests, and it's a jar file. It runs in Java. And then there's Sahi. Now, Sahi is, I think, probably the better tool, but it's a really small community. The only people who support it are the people who work there, and they are terrible at best. When the evangelists of a product are yelling at people to do a search because this has already been answered before, and they insist that it's not, and turns out the question asker is correct. It wasn't exactly answered before. It's bad PR. But the tool itself is JavaScript based, so there's no having to worry about, does my PHP driver support whatever thing I'm working on, and then my other team's working in .NET. What are we overlapping, and what if one test runs okay in the .NET one and doesn't run in the PHP one? There's none of that because it's all JavaScript based and it all runs through Sahi. They have two versions: an open source free version and then a pro version. The open source one is pretty okay. It works pretty great until you get to SSL. By the time you're doing a lot of HTTPS sort of sites, spending the $500 to upgrade to the pro one is worth it because the key manager on the open source one is kind of terrible and it's very cumbersome, and especially if you're doing it in an unattended continuous integration sort of a way, it's difficult to set up. But the thing with Sahi is that its record and playback is far superior to the Selenium record and playback. Selenium has a tool called the Selenium IDE, which runs in Firefox, and it'll record all of your clicks and your movements and whatever it needs to record to play back the actions that you take. But the way it saves them is this very proprietary HTML-based table structure. So every command is a row, and then there's 3 cells within each row, and one of them is the function call, and then one argument, and then another argument. And the only thing that interprets it is itself. It has some exporters. So like if you're using the .NET one, it actually exports really well. You do a record and playback. You record going through and automating your form. You can right-click on it, tell it to verify that elements are there. You can make it verify elements aren't there. You can do all kinds of crazy things with it. And again, for the .NET driver, it exports from the tool just fine. The PHP one does not. So a lot of times you're going to be doing a record and playback, and your record really is just sort of a guide, a set of suggestions for how you're going to actually write your WebDriver script. And again, I'll have one to show. So yeah.
I was just going to point out the other thing I've noticed with Selenium IDE is that if your site has jQuery on it, then some of the things that you're wanting to do, it won't catch it. It won't know what you're doing.
It often does not. With the AJAX stuff, it has to be explicitly told to wait for things, and sometimes that's on doing that on a timer is terrible news. But making it wait for elements to populate, it means that you could just have a simple failure. Maybe you had a text change, but now it's waiting for something explicitly, and you have to wait for it to time out in order for it to fail. And there's no perfect tool that does it. At least I haven't found the perfect tool. So in continuous integration, that's your ideal sort of a scenario for this. You have some continuous integration tool, Jenkins, Hudson. I just learned about another one that I hadn't used before, a web-based one, and now I can't remember the name of it. So whenever code gets committed, whenever a build is ready to be pushed, it runs the tests. So hopefully developers are running them before they commit and push. But when they don't, the continuous integration server reads the commit, kicks off the build, which isn't really applicable in our case, and then runs all the tests and emails everybody that you've ever met when a test fails. So you get test compliance through public humiliation, which works. But these things all have to integrate. So think about your tool sets. Hudson, Jenkins, cruise control. Any of these integrate with any sort of source control management. They all integrate with CVS if you like that, or Subversion, Git, whatever, and they will all hook in and react based on commits and pushes. You can schedule things based on the commit. You can schedule things to run and test and build every day. So yeah, you get them all working together. And again, the biggest hurdle on the automation thing is just starting, and it's not as bad as you think. So with that, I actually have a demo. All right, and let's see how this works, because we all know what happens with a live demo at a camp.
Oh, yeah.
Can we read it?
No.
Do I turn the lights on, down? Can you get it? There you go. That's better.
There we go. All right. I suppose I could probably play with the font settings somewhere. Oh, I have to go to PHP, don't I? See, now from here, I can't read it.
I think it was on the font. On the right side.
There you go.
Let's see if that works everywhere. All right, it does. Fantastical. So there we go, changing font size. I'll have Eric add that into his 12 awesome things you can do with PHP talk. So here we're using phpunit with the PHP WebDriver driver. Allegedly, this is the one that Facebook has developed that they use for their internal stuff and is now open source. Is anybody here not familiar with PHpunit? Okay, that's fine. All right, so we have these test cases, and it's a class of tests. So now we're going to run this setup method before every test and this teardown method after every test. So what we're doing is we are setting some options, creating a WebDriver object that's pointing to the proxy, which I can also show if I can find my cursor. So here we can see that I've already done a little bit of testing, and this is also eminently readable. Let's stop this. So here, in order to start the Selenium server, it's just starting a jar file using java-jar. And then it does some stuff and sets itself up on Jetty, and then in here, it's hard for me to read it from back here, tells you the address that the proxy is running on. And that's all we're referring to right here. So now I'm setting the development URL that I'm going to hit. and then a WebDriver get is what actually navigates to that URL, and then the tests begin. So what phpunit will do is inside a test class, any method that starts with test, that's what it's going to run. Once the test is finished, pass or fail, it'll do this teardown, which ours is just closing the WebDriver window. So walking through our set of tests here, first we're going to do some tests to make sure that we log in. Once we hit the site, we're not logged in, that we're anonymous. We can have another one where we go to a form, make sure some elements exist. We can make sure that an anonymous user can submit forms and fill out this web form. And a lot of what we're doing in WebDriver is a find element by some sort of selector and then doing something with the element. So here, in this particular case, we're looking for a confirmation message. So we're using a CSS selector, and it's a class of web form confirmation. We have an expected value for our return. We're getting the return value out of it with this get text, and then just doing an assert to make sure that these two are the same. So let's go ahead and run it. Oh, and of course they're showing up on this monitor.
So phpunit works along with Selenium?
Well, phpunit is how we're actually running unit tests, and again, they're acceptance tests, they're integration tests. But the PHP unit classes that we're writing here refer to the WebDriver library. And if we look under vendor here, again, the PHP Storm doesn't scale up all the fonts at the same time, so this might be difficult to read. So under vendor, we have Facebook, and here's our WebDriver, PHP WebDriver. So what the PHP unit is doing is PHP unit is just running the tests. It has the test framework. It has the asserts. It gives you your results for which tests pass, which tests fail. Draws your dots on the screen and whatnot. But the PHP unit tests are calling the WebDriver library to do the WebDriver automation.
So this type of approach is going to work currently and also with Drupal 8?
Yeah. With Drupal 8, I haven't actually delved too deeply into how to do the unit testing in Drupal 8. But if it's like simple test and the tests run on the server against a virtual kind of server, then I don't know that I would run these there, because that means that the server itself would be responsible for knowing where your Selenium proxy lives. And doing all the browser automation. I mean, on my deployment servers, there's no browsers installed. So all of these would probably have to live elsewhere. That's a good question. I'm not sure how Drupal 8 is going to do it. All right, let me go to mirror my display so that we can actually see it go. If I can find my cursor again, mirroring. There we go. Now let's run this again. So now we can see it's opening a browser, and that was the anonymous check. All it did was hit the site, make sure we have the login controls there, that we are anonymous. Now it's checking some links. So it's running through each one of the tests in that test file. Now we're actually filling something out. I think now we're going to make a user and fill something out. Oh, no, we're checking default values. So the default value form is one of the tokens in one of those default value fields is your username. So it hits it as an anonymous user to make sure that default value is blank, and then register to user, which we just saw, and then make sure that the default value is the new user's name. And there it is. They all passed.
Yay.
So
If it did not pass, you would see what?
I'll get to that in just a moment.
I'm sorry.
Good question.
Okay,
No. That's So if we take the close out of the teardown, it'll leave each of these browser windows open, so you can better see what it is. Like if you have a test that's failing, if you have a test that's failing, you just immediately run the test again with Selenium, and I hate that that's the answer, but a lot of times that's the answer. Now, when it fails the second time, take your browser close out of your teardown, and then you'll be able to see what the thing is doing. So you can see now it's leaving these extra Firefox up and running. I'll let it finish before I go look at them.
And you recommend just having Selenium on local machines or in an office to have a dedicated machine for that?
If you're running in a continuous integration sort of environment, definitely have some like Jenkins slave that's running Selenium and run tests against that. But for the most part, when you're a developer trying to do ATs on your own stuff, just run it locally. You can shut it down when you're done. It's nicely contained. You can check your own error messages. So actually, I'll get to the error messages in the log once we make an error. So yeah, here's the anonymous default your name. Here we can see that we've made an account. So it registered it, and here's just our epic timestamp. I do a lot of my tests based on that timestamp so that I can read the order of them and figure out when they were run later on. And now that we have that as our username, our form fills it out. So that's a test pass. And more just testing. Here's our little web form here. You can choose our favorite Muppet. Of course, when you leave it open like this, you do have to go and close all the windows. So now, looking at the, let's just go in here and look at our automation site. Sorry, I can't read it off the screen, off the big screen. So can you guys read it off the big screen well enough anyway?
So there you go, that's better.
All right. So we're looking at our anonymous web form. And now the requirement, the customer comes back and says, oh, we've had this huge upswing in Muppet popularity, and now Sam the Eagle is a huge hit. So add in Sam. So we save that, and now we run these guys again. Now one of our tests in here looks at that web form, makes sure that the options are what we expect, and then if they are, it'll pass the test. So now we'll see one fail because we're expecting the original 7 and not the 8th. Yeah, just a couple more. So an important thing to note also is that when one test fails, it won't fail the whole suite. It'll just fail the one test that failed. And there it is. So here we have a failure. Again, it won't blow up this, so I'll just read it aloud. So in our test and non-submit, which is this guy, it's actually going into form elements exist. And then here we can see that our expected count is 7, and it goes and it grabs every one of these Muppet radio button controls. And it said that it's failed, asserting that 8 matches the expected 7. So then we can either tell the customer, all right, yeah, you're right. Here we go. We'll change it to 8. I'm going to put this back in so that our windows are not unmanageable. We run it again. Our requirements have changed, so we update our test. run these all again, and now we should have them all pass. So, and then again, in addition to Firefox, you can have these run against Chrome too. I can show that in a minute. If you're running on a Windows machine, you can run it against IE. There's another little driver you have to install. Install. I think you just copy it in. It's a library, and it has to exist next to your Selenium server. And there we go. So we updated the test to match the new requirement. We put Sam in there, and now life is beautiful again. Let's close these guys down again. I should have closed before I ran that run. Here, we'll change this now to Chrome. Oh, I have an argument to specify. It is you have to specify a system setting for WebDriver.Chrome.Driver. Well, there's the live demo deal on. Thank you very much. So the other set of tests we have going here are to test comments. I must have also tested this in Chrome last. So we have a test here that a new user can register and get to form elements, and that they are what we expect, so we're validating our register form. Here's a custom assert method that I had to write for some particular function. I think that we're checking that an ID is that there's one of a particular ID. So this was something that I had to check multiple times in some sort of custom web form that I was doing. And here we have a helper class now, which does the register, for instance. So we handle our login here. This grab element by CSS selector, which is where I'm doing my explicit wait. So we have a minimum and a number of repetitions it'll do until it finds the one that it wants. And this helps reduce those false negatives a bit by making it wait until the DOM has been updated. I've got one that does the register flow. So now we can this guy. And look, yay, it's passing. That's it. This was a bit of refactored code. Normally I like to take my comments out, and I forgot. So now if we were to look at the Selenium IDE for this particular thing, it's not responding. Let's try quitting Firefox. We'll kill the Selenium server. We'll start Firefox. There was a Firefox update. What was it? It was last week, I think, and it actually invalidated the Selenium server jar. It wasn't compatible with the current Firefox. And apparently it also isn't compatible with the old IDE. All right, so I don't have much to show there. So I can't really show the record and playback, but that's what it does. It records and plays back. So in a nutshell, that's how simple automated testing can be. It's knowing when your feature is going to be done, knowing how to work through it and get it going in the browser, and then having that in a repeatable piece of code that you can that you can run before every deploy. So, questions? Yes.
So I imagine that you'd want to build and run your unit tests for each feature, right? And do it during development and before it makes it to the actual Q&A part.
Yes.
Makes total sense. But how do you get project managers on the same page? Because the project manager is not going to read my test code, know what I'm doing. Do we?
I don't really think that they have to. Really, a tool like Behat helps put tests into project managers' hands, puts tests into non-technical people's hands. This approach doesn't do that. It's part of the development effort. Because we know that when we're building some sort of custom data collection form that we have to exercise it and that QA also has to exercise it. And this takes the repetition out of that. Sure.
So one of the things that support frequently gets is clients are building forms on their sites, and we check to see whether anyone has submitted the form over a period of time, and if not, we're just manually going through and filling out the form, making sure it got reported.
Mm-hmm.
And the main deliverable of that is an email. So we want to make sure not only did the form get written to the database, which I can understand how to do, but send an email. So with Selenium, would I also be able to log into an email account and check?
If it's web-based email and you want to code that up to do that, sure. If it's off the web email with phpunit, you can actually write. I can't remember the classes off the top of my head, but in PHP you can get your you can read mail in, and you can do all the PHP stuff you want along with all the Selenium stuff you want.
Is there a resource out there that kind of has a codex or an explanation of, like, hey, I want to do this, use this class or run this test, or short of like going out and buying a thick WebDriver book? Is there a
a book with pages in it?
with actual pages? Yeah, WebDriver for Dummies. Is there a resource where you can just say, like, sort of,
I don't know that I've seen a really good cookbook for it, especially not for PHP. For .NET and for Java, there are a couple, and they translate pretty directly. If you can read C# and then in your mind translate dots into arrows, then sure, it's easy peasy. There's 2 Google groups. I probably should have included them in the slides, and I didn't. There's 2 Google groups that are really active for WebDriver things, and they're both fantastic. Just looking for Selenium Google group, you'll find it, and it's they're good resources. There's a bunch of smart people on there who are less snarky than Sahi people. Sahi-wise, there are a lot fewer resources. But another thing about, another benefit to running these all as PHP unit tests is that I can do this. I did this on the last of these tests, didn't I? Oh, and I closed Selenium. Start the jar back up and do our debug. And it'll run through. You can hit all of your breakpoints and use all of your Xdebug and favorite debugging tools, right in PHP Storm, which I hope you just learned about in the last hour. And eventually, when we get back to the test where I put the breakpoint, I should have done it on the first one. Actually, I might not have done it on the right test class at all. All right. I didn't. I just clicked go. Let's wait for this to finish. Thanks, Jack. Sure, thanks. Okay, there we go. So now let me click on the one that I actually want and do a debug. I was going to go through, I don't remember, I think there are 3 in this class. There we are. So now we're paused at our breakpoint, and I can actually just do this. Let's just do the one that we were doing here. And we can look at them right in here.
Okay.
And we can just run, let it finish. And I don't think I broke anything. They should all pass. That didn't pop me the window that time because it was a debug. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody.